one of my good friends, former Vice President Mike Pence, who I've known a very, very long time. Sir, how are you?
I'm great, Mark. Thanks for having me on tonight.
It's my pleasure. Mike, I want to ask you a couple of questions about abortion, and I don't know why we run from this issue. The Democrats don't want to codify Roe v. Wade. As bad as it was, Roe v. Wade placed some limits on abortion. It allowed states to regulate abortion in the last trimester. It was a little fuzzy about the middle trimester. The first trimester, they said, hands off, got it. When Dobbs was overturned correctly by the Supreme Court, the Democrats in the Senate voted on a bill that would not have codified Roe v. Wade. It would have codified abortion right up to birth without any limitations allowed by any states. And in fact, botched abortions, you wouldn't be required to try and save the baby that was actually born. Now, that doesn't sound like codifying Roe to me, does it to you?
Not even close, Mark, and thanks for your strong stand for life. You know, you and I have known each other a long time. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And it does seem like, you know, some in our party do want to shy away from this issue. But, look, the bottom line is the Democrats' position on abortion is the extremist position. They not only support abortion all the way up to the moment of birth, but, Mark, they support taxpayer funding of abortion up to the moment of birth. And for my part, you know, I'll always stand for the sanctity of life. The foundation I created in Washington, D.C. has weighed into this abortion pill case. My hope is that the Supreme Court does the right thing and overturns the FDA approval and we get the abortion pill off the market. But you know, at the end of the day, I truly believe that the American people believe in the sanctity of life. There'll be debates about where that line is drawn. I believe that life begins at conception, as you do, but the extremists in this debate are the Democrats and President Joe Biden, and I think the key going forward is making sure the American people understand just who the real extremists are.
And why do Republicans have such difficulty explaining this? I see Nancy Mace on TV. Why doesn't she at least say what the Democrats are actually for? Because they're not for codifying Roe, which would be bad enough. They're for abortion on demand right up to birth, which means partial birth abortion, which means sucking the brains out of the baby, torturing the baby. The baby has feelings. Why doesn't she explain these things? Why don't the rest of them?
I can't account for it. I really can't, because, you know, as I've traveled around the country, I have seen that men and women in the 22 midterm elections, if you just want to talk the politics of this, and the politics, I mean, you know me well enough to know the politics of this are secondary to me. I think the cause of life is the cause of our time. And with the 3 Supreme Court justices appointed during the Trump-Pence administration, we've given the American people a new beginning for life. We turn this question to the states, to the American people. We have an opportunity to restore the sanctity of life to the center of American law. But if you want to think about the politics of this, you know, there is this idea going around that it's a loser. The Democrats invest millions of dollars in it. But here's what we saw, looking very closely at these races around the country, Mark, and that is that Republicans that shied away from the issue, okay, or let Democrats define their position, did not fare well. But Republicans who leaned into the issue with principle and compassion did very well. And they did well in states and in congressional districts all across the country. I was in Des Moines, Iowa. We'll be back in Iowa this weekend. I was in Des Moines, Iowa, where Zach Main, all they did was run abortion ads against Zach Main, who has about 8 beautiful children with he and his wife. And he just went on television and he said, I'm pro-life. And it comes straight from our heart, and we love children. And he expressed compassion for women facing crisis pregnancies. He committed support for newborns at the same extent as the unborn. And now Zach Main, the citizen, is Congressman Zach Main in what was one of the most competitive races in the country. So that's my view, is our people don't understand that when you stand on principle and you express it with compassion, the American people will rally to the cause of life.
Let's talk a little bit about foreign policy. Let's talk about Israel and Iran and so forth. This administration has destroyed what President Trump and you did in the Middle East, absolutely burned it up with the Abraham Accords and so forth. You had the Iranian regime on its back economically. The people had risen up. They were in deep trouble. Now we have Saudi Arabia cutting deals with Iran, Iran cutting deals with China and Russia. Israel's getting pushed out again. Iran's now threatening to take Tel Aviv and I think they said Haifa, blow them off the face of the earth because they're within an eyelash of having nukes. Could this administration be more incompetent and outrageous in the way they've conducted themselves?
Boy, you know how to ask the hard questions. That's a hard question. I don't know if they could be more incompetent. I mean, some people ask me as I've traveled around the country the last 2 years if they said, did you know it would be this bad? And honestly, Mark, I thought it'd be bad. I've known Joe Biden for a long time, but I didn't know it'd be this bad. On not only, at home with record inflation, a crisis at the border, all of these things driven by their liberal socialist policies, but on the foreign stage, the abdication of American leadership, whether it be in the Arab world, whether it be in the wake of the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan that's emboldened authoritarian regimes around the planet, whether it be the failure to stand unambiguously with our most cherished ally, Israel. I really do believe what you're witnessing is a vacuum of leadership on the world stage, leadership that we provided under our administration that resulted in the first major peace agreement in the Middle East in 25 years in the Abraham Accords. And now we have China negotiating and brokering peace treaties between Saudi Arabia and Iran continuing to menace, continuing to enrich uranium, and, of course, Russia's unprovoked aggression and war in Ukraine that you've spoken out so eloquently on. I've stood firmly on American leadership and support for the Ukrainian military. But what you're witnessing here is a vacuum. It isn't failed American leadership. It's the absence of American leadership on the world stage. And just like nature abhors a vacuum on the world stage, a vacuum will be filled, and it will not be filled by the Friends of Freedom.
Let me ask you this. Are you concerned by a rising tide of pacifism and isolationism within the Republican Party as I am? That is, I'm not saying we intervene everywhere. That would be insane. It would be immoral. But on the other hand, I'm saying when it's a clear case of good against evil that does in fact affect our allies and us, you speak out about it. You're not equivocal, and you certainly don't take the wrong side. And I'm talking about Russia and Ukraine.
Right. Well, I am concerned. And, it would be a little more than a year ago, Karen and I actually, 1 month after the initiation of hostilities, traveled from Poland with a relief group into Ukraine. We went to a relief center. Mark, I saw sights I never thought I'd see other than in black and white films from the 20th century. I mean, women of every age, children of every age, all their earthly possessions on their backs that they could carry, fleeing from the unconscionable and unprovoked Russian invasion. And look, I believe, let's stipulate first, I mean, as Americans, like George Washington said, we have a long history of wanting to avoid foreign entanglements. John Quincy Adams said our nation should not, quote, go abroad seeking monsters to destroy. But in 1985, President Ronald Reagan, as you remember, articulates in his State of the Union address what came to be known as the Reagan Doctrine, which was if you're willing to fight the communists in your country, we'll give you the means to fight them there so we don't have to fight them here. And it was part and parcel of American policy that led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I believe for the same reason, we must continue to provide the Ukrainian military with the resources that they need to repel the Russian invasion and restore their sovereignty. Now, you talk about your term now, growing isolationism in some quarters of the Republican Party. And I will tell you, I think that's largely born of the utter incompetence of the Biden administration. And it's almost, I think, people look at the fact that the Biden administration has been slow in providing arms to the Ukrainian military. For heaven's sakes, we promised them 33 Abrams tanks in January. It's April 20th right now, and they're saying it may take another year to get the tanks there. Biden says in his State of the Union address that we're going to be there, quote, as long as it takes. Well, Mark, you and I both know it shouldn't take that long. I mean, we're the leader of the free world. We've marshaled a coalition of countries that are making historic investments in military equipment for Ukraine. We're the arsenal of democracy. Give them what they need. They repel the Russian invasion. And my last thought is anybody who thinks that Putin would stop if he overtook Ukraine has what we say here in Indiana, another think coming. I've met the guy. I've looked him in the eye. I know what this guy is made of. And I've also met President Xi, and I'll tell you what, you see Ukraine collapse into the hands of the Russian military. I think it will only embolden Xi and the Chinese communists to not only move after Taiwan, but to continue to extend their military provocations across the Asia Pacific. So providing the leadership, providing the support, while the Ukrainians make the fight. As I like to say, Ukraine is not our war, but freedom is our fight.
One last thing on your point here, Mr. Vice President, it's this. People say it's all the way over there. What's it have to do with us? Let me ask you this. How many major wars have started in Kansas? How many major wars have started in Indiana? How many major wars have started in the continental United States? None, other than the Revolutionary War, obviously, a couple of wars early on, the Civil War. But I'm saying this is the kind of mindset that has gotten us into world wars in the past. Your point. Putin's not going to stop a Ukraine. He'll cut through Ukraine, and then he's going after Poland. Now, who knows that? The Poles know it. That's why they're pouring all their military into Ukraine. And on and on and on. And you're exactly right. The way I see this, and you don't have to agree with me, to me, this is the battle of Ukraine, that we're already in World War III. It's a Cold War. You've got the access there now with China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. This is one battle now. They're watching to see how it goes. Then they're going to look at Taiwan. Then they may hit Israel. Who knows? But this formidable opposition has already been created. It's not like you take one country at a time. We have allies. We have NATO. And that's my concern. But anyway, I know you need to go, and I want to thank you for your time.
Mark, I'll tell you, though, there's an old saying, weakness arouses evil. And the weakness of the Biden administration on the foreign stage has emboldened the enemies of freedom around the world. And we make this stand here, we're going to have a quieter 21st century. You lose this stand here, pretty soon that Russian military is going to find themselves somewhere where we have to send American forces, where we have treaty requirements under NATO. That's why I'm going to continue, as you've been so clarion and so courageous, Mark. I'm going to continue to be a voice for America, being the leader of the free world, being the arsenal of democracy, and standing with those courageous fighters in Ukraine until they repel the Russian invasion and reclaim their country.
I think you make a great point earlier, too, about Biden. I think a lot of our folks see him as a very weak commander-in-chief, and he kind of undercuts the argument.
He does.
At least, and it doesn't help us at all. Well, stay safe, sir. You take care of yourself. And thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be on.